that those boycotts have worked in the past, right? It's like a boycott of 90% of products and food and tires. Even if it has some sort of economic impact, the industry is so tied to politicians that they give subsidies. So, vegans spend 10 years hurting the industry, boycotting dollar by dollar, and then the government comes in, signs a check. Here you go, $10 billion. Boom. All the progress that we made, gone, right? Hurting these industries supposedly. And the more that these industries are hurt, the more that they push the government, the more money that they get, and then they get to sell these foods to low-income people, to soldiers, and then they buy all the excess products that we didn't buy. So if we did this for enough time, of course, the amount of consumption, the consumption of these products would be so low that maybe people would start saying, this is ridiculous. We're giving all this money for these products that almost nobody buys, right? We could get there, and then people would be pissed off and they would be protesting and they would say, this is so unfair. But we can just start protesting now. We don't have to wait for that to happen and wait for years while the industry keeps being bailed out. So if it's a boycott, it's not a very effective boycott. Like people say, oh, but a lot of farms have been closing, and the truth, I saw an article recently, is that they haven't been closing, they've been consolidating, right? A lot of small farms have been closing because the big farms have been expanding, right? So it's not, there are less farms, but it's because power is being concentrated. So it's, as a boycott, it's not a very effective one. It's not enough to think that we can just boycott and end this industry. If it's a philosophy, a way of life, to try to harm less animals, then we can do that. We don't have to call it veganism. We can continue doing that. We can continue trying to live in a compassionate way, in all our consumption, not just in our food habits, but in driving, in our transportation, in everything. We can try to live this compassionate philosophy of life, but we don't have to call it a word that's pretty much universally misunderstood and almost universally disliked. We can keep living the same way without using this language, or at least we don't want headlines on the newspapers to use this word, I think. And I don't think we should have banners saying it. Okay. So also, if it's a philosophy, there's some things that are not included, right? And this is where I think that veganism is a bit inconsistent. So I'm gonna do a little exercise here. I want whoever is possible, whoever can, turn on their cameras. We're gonna use our cameras for a little exercise now. We're gonna do like thumbs up or thumbs down to show how people. So it's kind of like a survey. So the more people that we have, the better in our survey. So if you can, please turn on your camera for just a few minutes, so we can see where people stand on these questions. All right, so I'm going to ask questions, and you're going to start with your hand like in this middle position, and then if you say yes, right, or no, or if you're unsure, you just leave it in the middle, right? So the more people that we have on their cameras, great. I see a lot more people. So if you can do gallery view on Zoom, that would be better. So you can see a lot of people at the same time. And so you can try to get an idea on the top right where it says speaker view, or gallery view, you can click that. All right. So basically the questions are going to be, do you think this person is vegan or not, right? So, okay. So the first question, do you think a person who eats palm oil is vegan? Yes, no, or unsure? Okay, so I see quite a few unsures, some yeses, some nos. Okay, seems like we're pretty divided on this one. What about a person who their family member bought bread and it had honey on it? And they're like, it's already at the house. Oh shit, I bought you bread with honey. And a person eats that bread. If it's bought by somebody else on accident and they eat it, are they vegan? Okay. Okay, most people think that eating a piece of bread, even if you didn't buy it with honey, does not make you vegan. A few people say yeah, but most people say no. Okay. What about a person who flies to yoga retreats in Bali once a month from from Europe? They go once a month to fly to yoga retreats in Bali. Are they still vegan? Yes, no, or unsure? Okay, I don't think I see any no's. I see a couple no's. Okay. Okay. So this is interesting to me because I think one of them clearly harms a lot more animals than the other, right? The eating bread with honey that somebody else already bought versus flying on an airplane every month, right? I think one of them clearly causes a lot more harm to animals, but we're willing to give a pass to the people who fly every month because of this word is defined in the way that it is, right? Okay, what about a person who watches videos of the circus online? They don't go to the circus, they just watch videos of the circus on YouTube, and they see animals jumping through hoops and doing being on the tightrope and all that. Are they vegan? Are they vegan? Watch videos of the circus online. Yes, no, or unsure? Okay, all right, maybe like okay. You're not paying to keep these animals there, but you are watching it and enjoying these animals being used in this way. Okay, what about somebody who watches a TV show or a movie where they exploit animals? Like for example, Game of Thrones, they use a lot of horses there. I'm sure they're not happy. So is that vegan to watch Game of Thrones and give views to this TV show that's exploiting animals and give money and maybe pay a subscription to watch it? Is that vegan? Okay. Okay. Seems like there's some division on this one. Okay. What about a person who uses single-use plastic? Every day they go to a cafeteria and they use single-use plastic. They eat totally vegan, but they use fork and spoon and a cup and a plate, and then they dump them every day. Is that person still vegan? Yes, no, or unsure? Okay. Okay. All right. What about, so there's this idea of practical and possible, right? What about a person who's homeless, who only has access to a local food bank, but the food that they have there has dairy in it? So this person doesn't have a house, doesn't have an income, but they're eating dairy every week, but they say, I believe in animal liberation, but this is the only thing that there is. So I do eat dairy, and it's not practicable and possible for me not to eat dairy, right? So they're living as much as practicable and possible in this way, but for them that means eating dairy all the time. So is that person vegan or not? Yes, no, unsure. Okay. All right. Also, some mixed opinions here. It looks almost half and half. Okay. Thank you for that. My point with all this is that it's not very clear what exactly veganism means, even to vegans or people who identify as vegans. So, like, if we can't really have this clear idea of what this means, how can we expect other people to understand what we mean when they can easily say, you're flying all the time and using plastic and polluting, and the only thing I'm doing is eating bread with honey that my mom bought, and now you're going to tell me you're a more ethical and moral person and you're hurting less animals, right? But it seems pretty inconsistent if we're saying that we're trying to reduce harm as much as possible and live as compassionately as possible. It's just not true. Some people get the label vegan who could be hurting a lot more animals than people who don't have that label, right? So my point is that when we present our message about animals, we have two different framings that we can use to present our message. I think the strong framing is to talk about anti-speciesism. I think that's a really strong argument. And once you start debating, should we discriminate based on species or should we not? I think that's a really great argument. And I don't think there are a lot of answers that people are just gonna like get you on it, right? Because just like racism, sexism, speciesism, it's the same idea that people already agree with, that this is just not right to discriminate based on species. So we can use the anti-speciesist argument, which is really strong. But what happens often is we use this other messaging. We use the vegan framing that is around food, that is a much weaker argument than anti-speciesism. And people who eat animals, they know that this is a weaker argument. That's why I think a lot of times they go straight to veganism, right? So you're saying freedom for all, and they go into are those shoes leather? Right? That's not arguing anti-speciesism whether my shoes are leather or not. That's not anti-speciesism. That's veganism. They're talking about your individual consumption and whether you are actually trying to minimize the harm as much as possible in the ways that you say you are. So you get caught in these debates about consumption, and you get caught in like, well, you do this, you do that, and it's like, yeah, it's true. I do have an iPhone that has some minerals that were probably exploitative of humans, and I could have bought a fair phone. It's a type of phone that traces all their ingredients to make sure that that they don't hurt people. So veganism is not the best argument that we can use, and we know it, and we get caught. So we get caught in these debates about consumption. So if somebody goes on a TV show and they're saying, I'm against racism, I'm an activist for the liberation of people of color, it's not very common for them to start questioning their individual consumption habits, to tell them, where was that shirt made from? Was that shirt made in a sweatshop? It's just not an argument, because you don't get into the debates about consumption. You're talking about racism itself. But when you frame your argument in terms of vegan, I think it's a much weaker argument. So as speciesism argument, anti-speciesism, much stronger than the vegan argument, which like I said, it's not technically the best way to reduce harm to animals. And if it is a boycott, it's not technically a great animal-centered message. Is a stronger argument, and it's also clearer. It's more clear, and it's also something that people already agree with. If you talk about animal cruelty, if you talk about fairness and justice. And the other thing is that when you have this language that most people think that it's a diet, when we use that language and we don't go into details about it, a lot of times we are just talking about a diet because that's how people listen to it. So, for example, if somebody offers you a hamburger with the dead body of an animal, we say, no thanks. And if they ask, oh, why not? It's really good. You should try this hamburger. We might say, no thanks, I'm vegan. And we think that when we say that, people understand, and they're gonna get it that it's about animals, that you're standing up for freedom, for compassion, that you don't agree with this industry. But I think, as most of us said, in reality, what they're probably thinking is, oh, okay, this person has this weird diet. Okay, all right, I won't offer them hamburgers anymore. Yeah, I can't remember what that diet consists of. I wonder if they can eat fish, maybe. Yeah, it's this weird diet. It's like the new fad, just like gluten-free. So I feel when we respond, when they ask us, why won't you eat this? And we just say, no, I'm vegan. We think we're being clear. We think we're being short and to the point, and we're spreading the message. But I think in the majority of cases, we're just leaving the animals out because they're going to think, oh, that's a diet, end of conversation. As opposed to saying, if they ask you, like, why won't you eat this? If we don't use the word vegan, what would you have to say instead? I want people in the chat to respond. If somebody asks you, why won't you eat this burger, and you can't use the word vegan, what would you have to say instead? How would you say it instead if you can't use the word vegan? Okay, we have one person. I don't eat animals. I'm against exploiting animals. I don't eat animals. I care about animals. Right. So that's the thing. When you use or somebody says, I don't support violence, these are all really good. Can you tell the difference? When you don't use the word vegan, you're forced to talk about the animals. You're forced to talk about the issue at hand. When you use the word vegan, we do it because we feel it's more convenient, it's easier, it's shorter. I don't have to create an argument with people. It feels more comfortable. But unfortunately, we leave animals out when we use this word because they think it's a diet. Okay. Another question. If people want to turn their cameras on, I have another question that we're going to do yes, no, maybe. So I want to think about the environmental movement and wonder, should we encourage, should we push the environmental movement to be focused on consumption? So it's like the equivalent of veganism, right? Imagine that they change their ways and they become this like consumption focused movement, right? So imagine if you went to a climate march and you're meeting the people there, and the first question that they ask you is like, oh, how long ago did you stop using plastic? Because that's what we do a lot in our movement. We ask people, how long ago did you stop? How long ago did you become vegan? We just kind of assume that if they're there, they probably should be vegan, right? So do people think the environmental movement should become this way, that they should outreach people and tell them, you really should be plastic free. Here's some flyers, here's some documentaries. Do you think they should ask people to be plastic free? Yes, no, or unsure? Okay, some people are unsure. Some people don't think that it would be a good idea for the environmental movement. What about should they ask people to stop using cars? Yes, no, unsure. Okay, mostly no. Should they ask people to stop flying in airplanes? Should they be like, well, oh, are you still flying in airplanes? Oh wow, let me show you this documentary. It's really good, oh yeah, he's still flying in airplanes. This is my friend. He's still flying in airplanes, but he wants to help more. Okay, so I think like most people say no. Okay, what about so people don't think that it should become that consumption focused, but what about should the climate march accept people who use plastic, who fly in airplanes, who drive cars unnecessarily? Should the climate march accept these people, or should they not accept these people? Okay, all right, sounds good. Most people agree. Okay, so are you saying then that the climate march should accept hypocrites in their marches? Is that what we're saying? Yes, no, or unsure? Like, because these people are hypocrites, right? They're like, I'm against fossil fuels, but I just flew to Bali twice last month. Should these people be allowed to come on the march, or should they not be allowed to come march? Should they be allowed to come march, even if they're hypocrites, or should they not be allowed to march because they're hypocrites, right? So most people think the environmental movement should accept hypocrites, right? Okay. What about the animal rights movement? Should the animal rights movement in a march, should they accept hypocrites? Yes, no, or unsure? Okay, so some people switch to no. Some people think the environmental movement should accept hypocrites, but the animal rights movement should not accept hypocrites. Okay, all right. Last question. Are you a hypocrite? Yes, no, or unsure? Okay. All right. So, um, my last question is, um, do you think this is a fair comparison? And maybe it's not. Maybe it's not a fair comparison. I'm talking about ways that people hurt animals unnecessarily. And yeah, some people don't think it's a fair comparison. So maybe leave those messages there in the chat, and maybe we can get through it when we get to the Q&A. Okay. Let me look up some slides here on my computer, and in the meantime, I'll ask another question that it's not thumbs up, thumbs down, but just something to think about, is whether a label should exist at all. Like, what's a label for somebody who doesn't buy things from sweatshop companies that use sweatshop labor? People who don't buy things from sweatshop companies. There's just not a word for that. For people who boycott a certain type of product, it's just trying to be a decent person, right? Or people who don't buy things from sexist companies, it's just not a thing. It's just trying to be a good person. So it's this idea, like, do we even need a label at all? If we're trying to make this normal, why do we need to define ourselves as having the label? when we want our behavior to be the normal thing, why do we need to create this other word? So that's another idea. And I know some people say, this is what I've heard. It's like, well, the animal rights movement should not accept murderers into and people who sexually abuse other should not be accepted into marches. And what I want to suggest is that it's not the same to eat bread with honey or dairy than to sexually abuse people. Like it's just not the same. And using these extremes makes us really isolate ourselves from the rest of people who already are against animal cruelty, but they don't think that their particular consumption is that important for the bigger picture, right? So I'm going to show you a couple slides from my largest presentation. Give me 1 second. Share screen. Okay. All right. Can everyone see my screen now? Okay. Good. All right. So this idea of this is how I started thinking about this this message is basically it's a problem of market research. It's branding, it's public relations. This is what companies do. This is what nonprofits do, what movements do. They have a certain set of words that they use, and they put them out there, and they see what kind of response they get. And then if the words are not being super useful, they change the words and they use other words. But in this movement, we have become so attached to this vegan identity, to this vegan brand, that we refuse to let it go, even though everyone knows that it's a joke, that vegans are the punchline of so many jokes, and everyone hates vegans, and it's not clear, and most people misunderstand it. Like, I think it's a word that's not performing very well, and I'm going to show you some data, and we still keep using it, right? Any other company or movement would be like, okay, let's tweak our words. This word is not getting our point across clearly. Hey, maybe we can use better words. We don't have to totally abandon and like cross out our tattoos. But if we can start using better words, like, sure, let's do it. It makes sense. This is what branding, what PR is. And it's just so upsetting sometimes when we hear somebody call us the vegan protest movement in the media, because that's when you get farmers saying things like, if you want to be vegan, but leave us alone. They just don't get it because they see it as a diet. So I think that we if we can avoid the vegan protest movement, we can get a lot more people on board. Especially, like I said, it doesn't mention animals. Most people don't know it's about animals. And quick historical example, in the United States, there was this movement for the abolition of slavery called the Free Produce Movement. And what they did was pretty similar to veganism. They were trying to boycott all products that were made by slaves, like cotton, clothes made by slaves. And they lasted about 10, 15 years. And then even the founders of this movement, they said, you know what, let's just move to other tactics that are more direct, right? Like the Underground Railroad, just like actually taking these people, these enslaved people out, marching, protesting, lobbying Congress, because we're spending so much time trying to trace where the products came from and how they were made and all this. There was this huge complication on trying to boycott this product that they just universally said, this is just not the best way to do this, and they dropped it. This is one study that asked like 500 people their attitudes towards different groups of people, and the lower it is, the more disliked that you are. So as you can see, the second one, vegans, they're the most disliked except for drug addicts. But this is just one study, but I think we pretty much know from anecdotal experience that vegans are not very liked. It's just like something on Google when you ask, why are vegans so, like, these are some of the stereotypes that people have about vegans, some stereotypes. However, when you ask people, my next slide here, when you ask people, and this is how it's framed, animals deserve the same rights as people to be free from harm and exploitation. 32% of people think that animals deserve the exact same rights as people. Maybe some of them didn't understand the question, but it's still, maybe 20% of people who think that animals deserve the exact same rights as humans. But when you actually look, this is the same idea. This is by the Sentience Institute. They ask people, do you agree or disagree with this? Right. Whether to eat animals or be vegetarian is a personal choice. So 61% of people strongly agree that it's a personal choice. Then 27% agree, and 8% somewhat agree. The total for all the blue lines, all the agree lines, is 96%. 96% of people think that whether to eat animals or be vegetarian is a personal choice, right? Very clear. Mostly everyone thinks it's a personal choice. However, when you ask these other questions, I support a ban on the factory farming of animals, I support a ban on slaughterhouses, I support a ban on animal farming in general, then the percentages for this one, 42% agree on the first one, 42% agree on the second one, and 29% of people support a ban on all animal farming. So can you see the huge difference when you frame it as being vegetarian? When you frame it around food, everyone says this is a personal choice. We can't tell people what to do. But when you frame it around animals, people have really extreme views, and they want to end this. So you might ask yourself, why would people support something that goes against their own interest, right? It doesn't seem logical that everyone thinks it's a personal choice, but then they also think that we should ban these industries, right? It seems contradictory. But then, I remind myself, I think that, okay, so this can be a quick question. Who thinks that we should ban fossil fuels? Who thinks that we should ban all fossil fuels? Okay, most people think that we should ban all fossil fuels, okay? Who thinks that and also uses fossil fuels at the same time, unnecessarily sometimes? Right, so it's the same phenomenon, right? We think that something should be banned, but then we still use it. We would probably say whether to drive a car or not is a personal choice. We would probably say that, right? But then we still believe that we should ban fossil fuels. So it's the same idea. When you frame it as individual consumption, you're like, yeah, it's a personal choice. If I stop doing it, if I stop driving my car, that's not gonna end the fossil fuel industry. So why should I stop driving my car unnecessarily, right? It's just like, it doesn't make that big of a difference, but I still want to end the industry. So it's the same phenomenon where people say, yeah, we should end slaughterhouses, but then they think, well, my personal consumption is not going to make that big of a difference. And you can see that when you look at the percentage of people who are vegans. This next slide here, this is from Animal Charity Evaluators. They looked at a bunch of different studies to try to estimate the percentage of vegans. And it looks like the largest they got was like 7%. But this one asks, are you vegetarian, a vegan, or neither? Oh, actually, yeah, 7% vegan. So this is one of the highest that I've seen. But the point is that there's a huge difference between the people who support ending slaughterhouses, ending animal farming. There's a lot of them, maybe 20, 30, 40% of people. And then the people who are actually vegan themselves, it's maybe 2, 3, 4, 5%. So in between these two, this huge gap right here, are a lot of people who would support the message if it was framed around animals as opposed to being framed around individual consumption. Of course, there's some people who will never support the message, regardless of what we call ourselves. They will just never support the message. They don't think animals feel pain. They don't think that this is an important issue. Some people won't change, regardless of what language we use. That's to be acknowledged. But there are some people who will change, some people who are on the fence, and when they hear go vegan, go vegan, go, they're like, this is pushy, this is inconsistent because they're flying a lot, this is privileged because they don't live in a food desert and they have access to this. Even if these are all preconceptions and biases, that's what we're going to trigger in their minds when we use the frame of food, personal choice. But when we use the frame instead of animals should be with their mothers, babies want freedom, when we use this language, there is a percentage of people who will be like, yeah, I support those people. I think that it's a good point. And the last thing that I wanted to mention is that I think there's another issue with veganism is that it's so focused on changing individuals. It's focusing on changing individual diets. So I think instead of being on the streets trying to change individual diet of people, I think we should use that energy to change laws, to change systems. So, for example, instead of having 10,000 conversations on the streets, getting people to perhaps become vegan, maybe you only need to have 10 conversations with local politicians in your city, maybe in your state, and you can convince them to pass a law that helps animals in some way. Maybe actually helps animals, or maybe even symbolically helps animals, right? So, like that's what we did here in Berkeley when we passed the ban on fur, the ban on selling fur in Berkeley. There was very little fur actually sold in Berkeley, but we knew that it would be a strong symbolic victory, and it was pretty easy to pass. We spent some time talking to politicians, fixing the bill and everything, and we were able to get it passed. We showed up, we had a march around it, so it was very focused, like ban fur, ban fur, ban fur, and then we did it, we banned fur. Then the next year, we were able to do it in San Francisco. It becomes easier once people see that other cities have been doing it. And now, recently, the whole state of California has banned the sale of fur. So that was definitely a huge blow to the fur industry, a huge victory for animals. And it all started in this way because we started saying, let's take all that energy that's been used to convert people's to change their diet, and let's use it to convince politicians instead. And okay, I'm gonna finish this point, and then I'm gonna address a few questions that are here. So there's this equivalent National Rifle Association here in the United States. They are fighting for, as they would call it, gun rights. They would say that they're fighting for the Second Amendment of the Bill of Rights, which is basically they want people to be able to buy guns here in the U.S., right? And they donate money to politicians, and they also organize politically. That they have a lot of power compared to groups that donate a similar amount of money. They have a lot of power because they focus on politicians. They go to visit their offices, they call them, they send letters, they vote with politicians who are on their side on guns. They're very, very, very politically focused. And I think we can learn from them because they're not on the streets trying to convince people to boycott industries that are anti-gun, right? That just seems like so much of a stretch to get people to boycott industries that are against guns, right? They focus on like, let's go to these politicians and let's change them. Another way to change the system, if politicians are not an option, is to companies where you work with. You work at a company that has a big cafeteria, and you can talk to the chef, to the managers. Maybe you can convince people there to start serving vegan food, and that's it. With 2 conversations, you were able to create this institutional change, as opposed to trying to get people one by one to go vegan, when we know that I think it was like 80% of people who go vegan go back to eating animals, unfortunately. So I say we use that energy to try to create systemic change in government, in companies, as opposed to trying to change individual consumption, especially when we're like trying to get somebody from 92% purity to 97% purity. It seems like a lot of effort for a small change in purity, and it has become more about this like identity that like I'm more vegan than you, as opposed to just focusing that energy on trying to change systems. So I think instead we can focus on something like a animal bill of rights. We can focus on something even that's not as specific, like animal liberation, talking about rights, talking about freedom, talking about justice, talking about cruelty. I think those are better framings to use. Okay, so I'm seeing a question here. Okay, so somebody says that we need to work at all levels, and I agree. We should work on all levels, but I feel that the animal rights movement has been like 90% focused on go vegan, go vegan, go vegan, go vegan, right? So I would say let's take some of that back and move it into the direction of justice, liberation, focusing on politicians. So I'm saying even if we all need all sorts of strategies, and we should be using all sorts of strategies because some of them may be wrong and we want to be trying out new things, we can use less of an effort. I think we've been using a disproportionate amount on effort on this individual consumption. Yeah, so if the politicians don't want to change the laws, what strategies should we use? Politicians need to see that people care for the votes too. Right, yeah, I agree with all that. And the two are not mutually exclusive. Like, people start caring based on what people around them do. So when we passed this fur ban, and then all of a sudden it was in all the newspapers saying Berkeley has banned the sale of fur because they deemed that it was cruel to animals, that's going to change people's minds too. They're going to look at that and they're going to say, wow, Berkeley is such a progressive liberal city. They ban fur. They care about animals. And that makes them think, I care about animals too. Like, I'm glad that they did this. This is a good thing. This is what most smart people are saying, that fur is bad, that fur is cruel. So changing laws gets you press, and that also gets you to change what people believe. So it's not mutually exclusive. And politicians need to see that people care too for the votes. Absolutely. They're not going to go with something that's universally going to get them voted out of office. Definitely not. But you can make politicians think that there's more of you than there are by focusing on them. Like, this is what the National Rifle Association does. They call politicians so much, and politicians start thinking, wow, there must be so many people that care about this, because I've been getting calls about this thing nonstop. And you make them think that there's a larger number of people that care that actually does. Then when you pass these laws, you actually do get more people caring. And thirdly, is that people do care. People do care about animals if you frame it around animals. If you frame it around veganism, they're going to be like, no, I'm against this. But if you frame it around animals, people already do care. So I feel that if we try to pass a law that says stop piglet castration with no anesthesia, just like stop piglet castration, most people are going to be like, that's fucking horrible. You're castrating piglets without anesthesia. Most people are going to be on board, right? When you frame it around animals. But when you frame it as the vegan laws, of course, most people are not going to be on board, and the politicians are going to know that those are not laws that they can pass because everyone's against it. But when you frame it around animals, you can have a march against piglet castration. You can have many people calling the governor, hey, pass this law, make this illegal. And there are going to be a lot of people on our sides. So I think framing it in that way gets us a lot more support. Let's see. Yeah, I think somebody asked, what do you think about top to bottom and bottom to top activism approach? Should we focus more on one or stop bottom to top method altogether? No, I don't think we need to stop. Like, when I'm with my friends, I tell them, well, most of my friends are activists, but when you're with people that are still speciesist, I think we shouldn't be apologetic. I think we need to be honest. I just don't think that we should spend so much of our energy trying to change individual consumption. I think we can redirect a lot of that energy and focus it on politicians. So I wouldn't say that any method needs to stop altogether, because some people feel called to do different things, and we need to learn to work together because we all want the same goal of animal liberation. So I think everyone should be able to try out different strategies and do different things. And I would never say that one strategy should end unless there's like very, very, very clear evidence that it's harming animals. And I don't think any strategy that we're using is like at that level yet. Yeah, let's see if there's any other questions. Yeah, somebody says, yeah, I think we have more people on our side than we think we have. Yeah, that's so true. I feel if we frame it in the ways that, like, if you have a bill about like baby cows should not be separated from their mothers, and we frame it in this way, I think we're gonna get a lot more people than we frame it as like stop dairy, stop the dairy industry, right? Because that's already using the language of products. But if you use the language of families and keeping families together, I think it's a much more clear argument that people are already going to be on board with. Somebody says, I think the main challenge is to stop calling off other vegans because we don't agree in every single strategy. Yeah, I don't. I think I think infighting is a big issue for sure, and the point here is not to like create another group that's gonna create infighting. The point is to be more welcoming to people who want to end slaughterhouses but are still participating, right? Just like we want to end fossil fuels and we're still participating. It doesn't mean that we're gonna say that what they're doing is okay, or it doesn't mean that we're gonna sit at a table with a corpse in front of us. But it does mean being less focused on like, okay, I have 2 hours with this person. I need to convince them. I need to convince them to change their diet. It's like I'm gonna get them to call and call their local politicians and tell them that this bill against genital mutilation is not right. Right. I think that's a much easier ask, and we can start passing laws like this. Um, Somebody messaged me privately and said they just removed the word vegan from their bio. So that's cool if you want to do that. I think that helps people be on board. More people want to remove Instagram. I've had a lot of people remove the word vegan from their Instagram handles, from their profile names. Had a lot of people do that. Somebody says the animal rights movement is growing as never before. We should be doing something right. What do you think it is if it's not veganism? I think that we're growing because it's becoming clear how environmentally damaging these products are. I think we've gotten a lot of footage inside farms, especially humane farms, that have exposed people to the realities of this, and so more people are realizing that these products are cruel, that they're bad for the environment. There's been a lot of health push with like game changers and what the health. So I think that people are on board, and it's right that it's growing, and we should keep doing all these things, and we can keep doing all these things while talking about animal liberation instead of talking about veganism. I think we can keep doing the same things we're doing. Okay, somebody says some post-vegans are saying to people they are not vegans. Not in an interactive way, shaming to other vegans. Okay. Okay, yeah, so if people want to read that, it's the last question. Yeah, so I feel we should not be shaming anyone. We should not be shaming anyone. If people are really strong in like in their belief that veganism is a word that we should keep using, it's a message that we should keep educating people about. I would just say, just if they're really that convinced, just tell them to try it, right? It's just like try veganism, right? It's just like the opposite, just like try anti-speciesism, right? And that they're going to say like, well, no, I'm also anti-speciesism, but just tell them to try it. When somebody asks you why you don't want to eat something, just try not using the word vegan. When you're having a conversation, maybe an outreach, try not using the word vegan and see how it goes, and see what kind of responses you get, and see if it feels like we can get more people on our side. But I think we need to, not the same in the same way. We shouldn't be apologetic. We shouldn't say that we can't criticize veganism because people are going to be hurt and people are going to be upset and it's going to create division. Like, I think we have a duty to explore new strategies and to debate new strategies, and the truth will come out. If we have a disagreement about something, we should talk it out, debate it, write about it, have videos, and eventually I think we will have the truth come out eventually. So I don't think we should avoid these conversations, but when we do have them, we need to be really mindful that a lot of people have spent years building this identity, and they have all these clothing and products and this brand, and it's not easy to give up an identity, especially an identity that has defined us for so long. But I think we should have these conversations, and we should keep thinking about it. And yeah, I don't think I see. Maybe if I missed someone's question, they can copy it again. Sorry, I'm trying to look at all of these, and maybe I missed yours. If I missed one, please post it again. Okay, vegan labeling on products. I saw an article recently that I can't remember the percentage, but it was like when you put a vegan label on a product, it reduces how much people want to buy it by a pretty large margin. So I think a lot of companies are purposely using plant-based and not vegan because they know that it turns people off. I've seen a few articles on that. If people want, I can post them. But I think that's all I have. Instead, in case anyone has any last burning questions, you can also find me on Instagram, Orlando for Freedom. You can email me at orlando@directactioneverywhere.com. I'm going to type these out. If people want to talk more about this, have many more questions, reach out to me. So just to sum it up, let's not talk bad about vegans, about anybody. We're all in this together, but let's focus on having these tough conversations and talking about justice and freedom and focusing on systems, not on individuals. And let's talk about anti-speciesism. Let's talk about justice and freedom. If you feel up to it, change your